It began with a single statement. No photos, no dramatic press conference, just a short, tightly worded message posted on Buckingham Palace's official letterhead and shared quietly across the royal channels. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But within minutes, it spread like wildfire across every corner of the internet, igniting shockwaves that reached far beyond the gates of the palace. In a few simple lines, the world learned that Princess Charlotte of Wales, the spirited and beloved daughter of Prince William and Princess Catherine, had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition, one that, according to medical experts, she will have to manage for the rest of her life. At first, many thought it was another rumor. The royal family had weathered endless gossip over the years, and public skepticism toward tabloid headlines had become second nature. But as major news networks began confirming the story, BBC, Sky News, CNN, even Kensington Palace's official spokesperson, the gravity of the situation became undeniable. This wasn't a rumor or another speculative story. It was real, and it carried a kind of sorrow that pierced through the pomp and glitter of royal life, reminding everyone that behind the titles, the crowns, and the ceremony were human beings, vulnerable, emotional, and sometimes heartbroken. The palace's statement, though measured and restrained, carried the unmistakable weight of pain. It read, "Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte of Wales has recently been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. She is under the care of leading medical specialists, and her family appreciates the privacy and compassion of the public as she begins her treatment journey." It was brief, factual, and devoid of unnecessary detail, yet it left the world with 1,000 questions. What condition? When did it begin? How serious is it? And, perhaps the hardest question of all, what does this mean for Charlotte's future? For years, the world had watched the young princess grow into a symbol of charm and confidence. From her poised waves at Trooping the Color to her mischievous grins during family portraits, Charlotte had captivated millions. She wasn't just the daughter of a future king. She had her own presence, her own light. Many saw in her the warmth and charisma reminiscent of her late grandmother, Princess Diana. To imagine such a bright child facing a lifelong medical challenge felt almost unthinkable. Yet, here it was, laid bare in black and white, a reality that neither privilege nor power could shield her from. Inside the palace, according to sources close to the family, the atmosphere was one of quiet sorrow mixed with resilience. Prince William, known for his composed demeanor, reportedly struggled to hold back tears when informed of his daughter's diagnosis. Catherine, ever the pillar of grace, is said to have been by Charlotte's side through every test, every consultation, every sleepless night. Those who have known her say she has barely left her daughter's side, balancing royal duties with the unrelenting vigilance of a worried mother. It's the kind of devotion that no title can define, the kind of love that only deepens in the face of fear. The news didn't just affect the royal family. It rippled through the public with a profound emotional charge. Messages of support flooded royal social media pages. Parents of children with autoimmune diseases began sharing their own stories, their struggles, their hopes, forming a chorus of empathy across continents. Some even left flowers outside Buckingham Palace with handwritten notes for Charlotte. It was a collective outpouring of love for a little girl most had never met but had come to adore. Yet, beneath the compassion, another current began to stir, the question of why the palace chose to make the diagnosis public at all. Historically, the royal family has guarded medical information with near-impenetrable secrecy. The late Queen Elizabeth's health was always treated as a matter of national stability, not public curiosity. For the palace to reveal something so personal about a child was almost unprecedented. According to insiders, the decision was not made lightly. Rumors had already begun circulating after Charlotte was absent from several public events earlier in the year. Whispers of fatigue, hospital visits, and unexplained absences from school were becoming impossible to control. By making a formal statement, the palace sought to maintain honesty while protecting the family from invasive speculation. The revelation also exposed a painful truth about royal life: that privacy is a luxury even illness cannot always buy. In the weeks leading up to the announcement, photographers had reportedly tried to capture images of Charlotte at medical facilities. Paparazzi lenses had even been spotted near the family's private residence. It was, in many ways, a cruel reminder that fame and scrutiny often walk hand in hand. For a child still learning who she is, to face the glare of the world in such vulnerable circumstances must be terrifying. Still, amid the shock, there was something deeply humanizing about this moment. The royal family, often seen as symbols of perfection and control, suddenly felt real, fragile, like everyone else. It reminded people that wealth and power do not grant immunity from suffering. They cannot cure disease, they cannot erase fear, and they cannot silence the heartache of watching a loved one in pain. This was a story not just about royalty but about parenthood, resilience, and the unpredictable fragility of life itself. Doctors consulted by the media described autoimmune conditions as complex, lifelong challenges where the body's defense system mistakenly attacks itself. While the palace has not revealed the specific diagnosis, speculation among medical experts suggested it could range from lupus to juvenile arthritis or an even rarer immune disorder. What is certain is that such conditions often require lifelong treatment, careful medication, routine monitoring, and the emotional fortitude to live with uncertainty. For a young child like Charlotte, the journey ahead will not be easy. Yet those close to her say she's already showing remarkable courage, refusing to let the illness dim her spirit. In the weeks following the announcement, subtle changes in the family's public appearances were noticed. William and Catherine appeared together more frequently, perhaps as a show of unity. Their smiles, though genuine, carried a subtle heaviness, the kind that lingers after nights spent worrying. Charlotte herself has been seen less often, her public schedule reportedly scaled back to accommodate her health needs. Royal aides have emphasized that her schooling continues, though in a more flexible arrangement, with teachers and tutors adapting to her new medical routine. But behind every royal protocol, there's a family trying to heal. The Waleses have always been regarded as the most modern branch of the royal family, hands-on parents who value emotional openness. Now, that philosophy is being tested in ways they could never have imagined. Friends close to them describe evenings spent in quiet prayer, shared laughter during good days, and silent tears on the harder ones. It's a portrait of resilience, one that paints them not as monarchs in waiting, but as parents doing everything they can for their child. The press, for once, has largely shown restraint. Even the most sensational outlets tread carefully, aware of the public's protective sentiment toward the young princess. Commentators and medical experts have turned the story into a moment of awareness, using it to educate viewers about autoimmune diseases in children. Charities dedicated to research and treatment have seen an uptick in donations, many accompanied by messages addressed to Charlotte. "You're not alone," one letter read, left among the growing pile of flowers outside Kensington Palace. "You have the love of the world behind you." For many Britons, this story has also evoked a haunting sense of déjà vu. Memories of Princess Diana's struggles with the press, her vulnerability, and her fierce love for her sons have resurfaced. Some have drawn emotional parallels between Diana's compassionate heart and her granddaughter's emerging grace under pressure. In a way, the public sees in Charlotte a continuation of that spirit, a lineage not of royal blood alone, but of courage and empathy. And yet, beneath the sympathy and support, the story also forces a broader reflection. What does it mean to grow up royal in the 21st century, under constant watch while facing something so profoundly personal? How does one reconcile duty with the reality of human frailty? These are questions no crown can answer, and yet they now define the quiet struggle within the walls of Kensington Palace. As the introduction of this story closes, the tone shifts from shock to contemplation. The news may have begun as a headline, but it has already evolved into something far greater, a mirror held up to the monarchy and the world. It exposes the fragility of human life even at the highest levels of power, and it invites empathy from every corner. The cameras, the newspapers, the world's curiosity, they all fade in the face of one undeniable truth. A young girl is fighting a battle she never asked for, and her family stands by her side, determined to see her through. In the days ahead, more will be revealed. the nature of her condition, how it was discovered, how her parents are coping, and what the palace is doing to ensure she lives as normal a life as possible. But for now, the world waits. And in that waiting lies a rare kind of unity, one that transcends class, politics, and even the monarchy itself. Because at the heart of it all, this is not just a royal story. It is a human one. And as millions quietly whisper words of hope for Princess Charlotte tonight, Buckingham Palace remains still under the London moonlight, its walls holding secrets of sorrow, its heart beating with the same fragile rhythm as every family who has ever faced the unknown. The announcement did not come with fanfare or ceremony. It wasn't delivered from a balcony, nor did it arrive through a grand speech broadcast to the nation. Instead, it emerged quietly, almost timidly, through an official Buckingham Palace communiqué at precisely 8:30 in the morning, London time. The press office sent the statement to major news agencies first, then released it across digital platforms. Within seconds, royal correspondents from every corner of the world were reading and rereading the same set of words, struggling to grasp their full meaning. The morning light had barely broken through the autumn clouds when reporters began crowding outside the palace gates. The air was tense but hushed. There were no blaring sirens, no flashing lights, just the soft murmurs of disbelief that passed between seasoned journalists who had covered countless royal stories, but never one that felt quite like this. The tone of the palace's message was uncharacteristically vulnerable. Royal announcements usually spoke of engagements, ceremonies, or policy initiatives. Rarely did they address private matters, especially those involving a child. Yet this message carried an unmistakable sadness, one that no amount of polished phrasing could disguise. Inside the Royal Communications Office, it had taken weeks to prepare this single statement. Advisors debated every word, every comma, and the precise time of release. According to sources close to the team, Prince William and Princess Catherine were personally involved in its wording. They wanted honesty, but they also wanted dignity. Their daughter's life was about to change forever, and they refused to let her become a spectacle. For them, transparency was not about feeding the public's curiosity, but about controlling the narrative before speculation consumed their family's truth. When the statement was finally released, the palace press secretary stood silently for a moment in his office, aware that once it reached the media, there would be no turning back. By mid-morning, every major British outlet had carried the story. The BBC interrupted its scheduled program with a solemn bulletin. The newscaster's tone was measured, deliberate, and heavy with empathy. Buckingham Palace has confirmed this morning that Princess Charlotte of Wales has been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition requiring long-term treatment. The palace has requested privacy for the princess and her family during this time. The phrasing was cautious, but the implication was enormous. For the first time in recent history, the monarchy had allowed the public into the most vulnerable corner of its life, the health of a young royal child. By noon, social media was in an uproar. Hashtags like Pray for Charlotte and Stay Strong Charlotte began trending globally. Thousands of people flooded the comments section of Kensington Palace's official page, leaving prayers, messages, and heartfelt letters. Many were parents themselves, recognizing the weight of that single word, diagnosis. Across the Atlantic, major American networks picked up the story almost instantly. CNN and NBC ran the same clip of a smiling Charlotte at a previous royal event, juxtaposed with the breaking headline. Australian morning shows paused their usual entertainment segments to discuss what this news meant for the royal family's future. Even leaders of other nations sent private messages of concern. Behind every public statement, there was a shared sense of sorrow for a family that, despite its privilege, was facing the same fear millions of parents confront daily: the uncertainty of a child's health. Meanwhile, at Windsor, the family had already begun adjusting to the emotional storm that was sure to follow. Prince William reportedly spent the early hours of the day pacing in his private study, the letter of release still open on his desk. Those close to him described him as reflective and unusually silent. Catherine, though heartbroken, had insisted on keeping their routine steady for George and Louis. Charlotte, according to one aide, had been shielded from the full weight of the public reaction. She knew she was unwell, But she didn't yet grasp that her condition had become global news. Doctors specializing in autoimmune diseases began speaking publicly in an effort to provide clarity without intruding on privacy. One well-known London immunologist explained in a live interview that such conditions are unpredictable but manageable with early intervention. "What matters most," she said, "is that Princess Charlotte receives consistent medical attention and emotional support. These conditions do not define who a person is, they are simply challenges to be lived with." Her words resonated with viewers who had faced similar struggles. For a moment, medicine and monarchy intersected on common ground: compassion. As the mourning unfolded, the palace's measured approach began to reveal its deeper purpose. By choosing to confirm the diagnosis in an official, controlled manner, they prevented misinformation from taking root. For months prior, rumors had been circulating about Charlotte's absence from certain public events. Some tabloids suggested fatigue or illness. Others speculated family tension. Left unchecked, these stories might have spiraled into conspiracy. The official confirmation, though painful, was necessary to restore truth. Still, the statement's release carried an emotional cost. In the hours following the announcement, royal photographers stationed outside the palace caught glimpses of Catherine arriving at Kensington. She wore a dark coat and no makeup, her expression somber but composed. Her security detail moved swiftly, allowing no opportunity for questions. The photographs that emerged later that day captured a side of royalty rarely seen: an image of a mother carrying the invisible weight of grief. Prince William made no immediate public appearance. His silence was intentional, meant to protect his family's privacy. Yet those who knew him understood that he was already navigating the delicate balance between his royal duty and his personal anguish. For William, the responsibility was double-edged. He had to lead with strength while also comforting his daughter, ensuring that her young mind was not burdened by fear. Later that afternoon, the palace press office issued a brief follow-up, confirming that Charlotte was resting at home and continuing her schooling privately. They expressed gratitude for the outpouring of love from around the world. The statement ended with a simple request: the family appreciates continued understanding as Princess Charlotte adjusts to her treatment. The phrasing was simple, yet it carried a quiet plea, a reminder that behind the grandeur of the monarchy stood parents desperate to protect their child's peace. For those close to the family, this moment marked a shift in how the public viewed the royals. The veil of perfection had been lifted slightly, revealing something tender, something painfully human. The palace's handling of the announcement, transparent yet dignified, earned widespread respect. Even critics of the monarchy acknowledged the courage it took to address such a private matter openly. It was, as one commentator noted, a new kind of royal honesty, one that connects rather than separates. But while the statement quelled rumor, it also invited introspection. In cafes, living rooms, and offices across the United Kingdom, conversations began not about politics or tradition, but about health, children, and the fragility of life. People spoke about how even the most privileged families were not immune to suffering. Parents shared their experiences of hospital visits, medication routines, and sleepless nights spent worrying. In a way, Princess Charlotte had unknowingly become a symbol, a reminder that vulnerability unites humanity more deeply than power ever could. As evening fell, candlelight vigils appeared outside Buckingham Palace and in several cities. People gathered silently, holding photos of Charlotte from her public appearances. Some prayed, others simply stood in quiet solidarity. The press, usually aggressive during royal crises, took a noticeably softer tone. Television anchors spoke of compassion, of faith, and of the importance of family. For a brief, rare moment, the British media landscape seemed to shift from cynicism to sincerity. Behind the palace walls, the family reportedly watched the coverage in subdued silence. William and Catherine, seated together in their private lounge, saw the images of supporters outside the gates. Catherine, her eyes glistening, whispered something to her husband that only he could hear. Those who know the couple well say that moment captured everything: the pain of exposure and the relief of empathy. For once, the world was not judging them but embracing them. Medical specialists close to the royal household continued their assessments, creating a long-term treatment plan tailored for Charlotte's needs. Though her condition was described as rare, the doctors were optimistic about her prognosis with proper care. The family's confidence in the medical team was strong. The palace confirmed that Charlotte would receive both hospital-based and home treatments, ensuring she could maintain as normal a childhood as possible. Still, the uncertainty lingered. Royal watchers speculated on how this might shape Charlotte's future role within the monarchy. Would her public duties be limited? Would she grow up shielded from the spotlight? No one knew for certain. Yet, among all the speculation, one thing became clear. This revelation had permanently altered how the public viewed the next generation of royals. Charlotte had always been the bright spark in the household, full of energy, curiosity, and that irresistible mischief that melted the sternest adult in seconds. That morning, she was her usual self at first, teasing George, asking their mother a dozen questions about her pony, and fussing about wearing her favorite hair bow. There was nothing unusual, nothing that hinted at the quiet storm forming inside her little body. But as they prepared to leave for school, Catherine noticed something that made her pause. Charlotte was moving slower than usual. Her steps lacked their usual bounce. When Catherine touched her forehead, there was no fever, but her daughter's eyes seemed tired, almost distant. "Are you feeling all right, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Charlotte nodded, insisting she was fine, but when she reached for her backpack, her small fingers trembled. It was subtle, so slight it could have been overlooked, but a mother's instinct rarely misses what logic might excuse. That night, when the children were asleep, Catherine mentioned it to William. They both agreed to keep an eye on her. Perhaps she was tired, they reasoned. The previous week had been busy with school rehearsals and family engagements. Children get run down, they told themselves. But within days, the fatigue became harder to dismiss. Charlotte began to complain of stiffness in her joints, especially in the mornings. Some days, she said her legs didn't want to move. The first doctor they saw suggested it might be growing pains, common in children her age. The family tried to relax, but Catherine's worry only grew. Something didn't feel right. Over the next few weeks, the symptoms multiplied. Charlotte would wake in the night crying softly, holding her knees. Some mornings, she struggled to grip her pencil at school. Teachers noticed her once flawless handwriting becoming uneven. Despite her cheerful spirit, there were moments when she seemed withdrawn, exhausted by simple tasks. It was during one of these moments, watching Charlotte lean heavily on her desk at home, that Catherine knew this was no ordinary childhood ache. William, though calm by nature, felt the same fear tightening around his heart. As a father, he wanted to stay composed, to be her steady anchor. But deep down, the helplessness was suffocating. They scheduled further medical evaluations, first at a private clinic in Windsor, then at a specialist facility in London. Days turned into weeks of blood tests, scans, and late-night consultations. The doctors were kind, their tones reassuring, but the absence of clear answers made the silence between William and Catherine heavier each evening. Charlotte, unaware of the storm of concern surrounding her, tried to stay brave. She'd smile at the nurses, asking curious questions about the machines and vowing she'd be home before bedtime. Her courage broke her parents' hearts. Catherine would often wait until Charlotte was asleep before retreating to another room to cry quietly, careful that none of the children heard her. The doctors began to suspect an autoimmune disorder, but further testing was needed. The waiting period became a blur of anxious days and sleepless nights. Then came the morning when the phone call arrived. Catherine was in the kitchen making tea when her mobile rang. The voice on the other end belonged to the lead specialist, his tone professional yet cautious. He asked if both parents could come in that afternoon. It was the kind of request that carries unspoken gravity. William left his meeting immediately. They drove to London in silence, their hands clasped tightly together in the car. When they arrived at the hospital, they were ushered into a small consultation room. On the wall hung a framed photograph of a sunrise over the Thames, a symbol of hope, perhaps deliberately chosen. The doctor entered, greeted them gently, and sat across the table. He spoke slowly, explaining the test results in medical terms that blurred into a single, overwhelming truth. Princess Charlotte had an autoimmune condition, rare, lifelong, and unpredictable. It was not terminal, but it would require ongoing care, medication, and constant monitoring. There was no cure, only management. For a few moments, neither William nor Catherine spoke. The words hung in the air like a dense fog. The doctor paused, allowing them to process. Catherine's first instinct was disbelief. How could her vibrant, healthy daughter be facing such a challenge? William's jaw tightened, his composure cracking beneath the weight of fatherhood's deepest fear. Eventually, Catherine asked the only question that mattered. Can she still live a normal life? The doctor smiled softly. Yes, he said. With care, love, and treatment, she can thrive. But it will be a journey. The drive back to Windsor felt endless. The car moved through the streets of London, but neither parent noticed the scenery. They held hands in silence, each lost in thoughts of their daughter's future. That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat together in the living room, the reality sinking in. For William, memories of his late mother surfaced, the media frenzy, the relentless exposure. He swore silently that Charlotte would not endure the same. For Catherine, the instinct to protect became fiercer than ever. She decided that night she would learn everything about her daughter's condition, no matter how complex, so she could be an active part of her care. The following days were filled with medical appointments, specialist consultations, and long discussions with the royal household's medical advisors. The palace was informed but kept the information strictly confidential. Only the king and queen consort were told immediately. Charles reportedly reacted with deep concern, offering to provide access to any medical resources the family might need. Queen Camilla, in her own quiet way, sent a personal note to Catherine expressing empathy and support. Meanwhile, the Wales household adjusted their routines to accommodate Charlotte's care. Mornings started earlier, allowing extra time for her medication and stretching exercises. Tutors adapted lessons to her energy levels. Even George and Louis became protective in their own ways, George helping her with schoolwork, Louis holding her hand when she tired easily. Despite their young age, they sensed the gravity of what their sister was going through. One afternoon, Charlotte asked Catherine why she needed so many tests. Catherine knelt beside her and said softly, "Because sometimes our bodies need help remembering how strong they are." Charlotte nodded thoughtfully and replied, "Then I'll help it remember." It was a simple answer, but it revealed a strength beyond her years. That evening, Catherine shared the moment with William, and for the first time in weeks, they both smiled through tears. Behind the scenes, the family's communications team began planning for the possibility that the story might leak. A child's medical condition, especially a royal one, was nearly impossible to hide indefinitely. They monitored media inquiries, reviewed past absences, and crafted responses that offered dignity without detail. Every step had to be calculated to protect Charlotte's well-being. For weeks, they balanced secrecy with preparation, hoping to buy time for her treatment to stabilize before the inevitable announcement. Yet even in their guarded world, whispers began circulating. Sharp-eyed royal reporters noticed Charlotte's absence from a few key events. Questions surfaced on social media. Some speculated about an injury, others suggested stress or educational adjustments. The palace, adhering to its long-held tradition of privacy regarding minors, refused to comment. But the family knew the moment of truth would eventually arrive. The day everything changed wasn't just the day they received the diagnosis. It was the day they realized life would forever have two parts, before and after. Before, when health was taken for granted, when laughter echoed without worry. After, when every smile carried gratitude, and every morning began with silent prayers. For William and Catherine, it marked the birth of a new kind of strength, the kind forged not in ceremony but in sleepless nights, medical charts, and whispered reassurances. The world still saw the polished exterior of royalty, the poised public appearances, the graceful smiles. But inside their private home, the family moved through each day with a quiet determination. Every small improvement was celebrated. Every setback was met with gentle perseverance. And though they hadn't yet shared their secret with the world, they had already accepted the truth that would soon ripple across nations. Princess Charlotte's life would never be the same, yet her spirit was unbreakable. That day, when they tucked her into bed and kissed her goodnight, they both lingered a little longer. Charlotte drifted to sleep with her stuffed animal clutched in her arms, unaware of the heavy love watching over her. William turned off the lamp, whispering softly to Catherine, "Whatever happens, we face it together." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. The words were simple, but they became their quiet vow, a promise to their daughter and to each other. Outside, the spring night was still. The stars shimmered over Windsor, indifferent to human pain, yet somehow comforting in their silence. Within those walls, the royal family began a new chapter, not one written in gold or ceremony, but in courage, patience, and faith. That was the day everything changed. In the weeks that followed the diagnosis, Buckingham and Kensington palaces seemed quieter than usual. The royal residences have always been places where protocol and tradition mask emotion, where even grief must follow a schedule. But this was different. Behind the closed doors of Adelaide Cottage, the usual rhythm of royal life slowed to a near standstill. The family moved carefully, adjusting to a new reality while the world outside remained unaware. Every sound, every pause in the halls, carried the weight of what they were trying so hard to keep private. The royal family has always lived under a paradox. Their lives are public by design but sacred by necessity. For Prince William and Princess Catherine, that paradox had never felt sharper. Every decision they made now had to balance two impossible priorities: protecting their daughter's privacy while fulfilling their roles as senior members of the monarchy. It was not the first time the palace had faced sensitive medical matters, but it was perhaps the first involving a child who represented the monarchy's future. They knew that once the information became public, there would be no reclaiming their peace. Each morning began with the same quiet routine. Charlotte's medication was measured carefully, her meals planned to reduce inflammation, her energy monitored closely. The palace medical team coordinated with external specialists, ensuring the best care possible. Still, despite the clinical precision, the emotional strain was relentless. Catherine, usually composed and radiant, often appeared distant, lost in thought. Staff noticed her spending long hours reading medical journals, determined to understand every aspect of her daughter's condition. William took on more school drop-offs, a task he once enjoyed for its normality but now approached with anxiety, wondering if Charlotte would have the strength to face a full day. Inside the palace, conversations turned inward. Meetings about upcoming engagements were suddenly postponed. Staff members were instructed to keep inquiries discreet and to divert any mention of Charlotte's health away from press discussion. Senior advisors knew how quickly rumors could grow and how brutal the media could become if given even a whisper of uncertainty. For decades, the royal family had learned to guard its vulnerabilities behind immaculate smiles. Now that lesson was being tested again. In those quiet days, the Waleses relied heavily on their closest circle, Carol and Michael Middleton, who often visited to help care for the children, a small team of trusted aides, and the family's private secretary who shielded them from the constant stream of inquiries. The Middletons' presence brought comfort, grounding Catherine in the familiarity of family warmth. Her mother's calm advice was simple but powerful. Focus on love first, logistics second. It became Catherine's silent mantra as she navigated the endless cycle of hospital visits, sleepless nights, and public appearances that demanded smiles she no longer felt. Publicly, nothing had changed. The family still attended selected events, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Photographers captured Catherine at a charity luncheon, her posture flawless, her smile practiced, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. William delivered speeches with his usual sincerity, though those close to him noticed the faint tremor in his voice when he mentioned the importance of children's health. The royal calendar remained full, but beneath the surface, everything was rearranged around Charlotte's condition. Each event was chosen carefully, ensuring at least one parent was always nearby. At Kensington, the communications office worked under immense pressure. They drafted contingency plans for every possible scenario. A journalist discovering medical documents, an anonymous leak, or a photo taken at a hospital. Every draft statement was reviewed by William and Catherine personally. The phrasing was critical. Too much information would invite intrusion. Too little would spark speculation. The family wanted control over their story, but they also knew control was an illusion once the public eye turned toward them. What made the silence so difficult was the emotional duality it created. On one hand, the Waleses were grateful for privacy. On the other, the secrecy felt suffocating. There were moments when Catherine wished she could speak openly, to share her fears and ask for understanding. Not as a princess, but as a mother. William felt it too, though he buried his emotions under duty. Late at night, after the children were asleep, they would talk for hours in hushed voices, trying to make sense of it all. Some nights ended in tears, others in quiet determination. They promised each other that whatever the world said when the news broke, they would face it together. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace's senior advisors discussed how to handle the inevitable revelation. The king, though sympathetic, was firm about protocol. Health matters, especially those involving minors, must be treated with utmost discretion. Still, Charles was deeply affected. In private, he called William often, not as monarch to heir, but as father to son. "Remember," he told him once, "we may carry the crown, but we are still human. Do what's right for your child." It was one of the few pieces of advice that truly comforted William. Even as they maintained outward composure, signs of tension began to show. The staff at Kensington noticed how William's meetings grew shorter, his patience thinner. He had always been approachable, but lately, there was an edge to his tone. A man torn between the precision of duty and the chaos of fear. Catherine, meanwhile, found herself withdrawing from social functions. Invitations were politely declined. Charities she once championed were reassured that her absence was temporary. Few suspected the real reason behind her retreat. During this time, Charlotte continued to amaze everyone around her. Despite her illness, she remained cheerful and curious, insisting on attending lessons and participating in family outings when she could. Her resilience became a quiet source of strength for everyone. Teachers at her school noticed her determination, even when her body seemed to resist. They adapted her schedule, giving her rest breaks and shorter assignments. Her classmates, unaware of her diagnosis, simply thought she was a bit tired. One of the most poignant moments during this period came one afternoon in the family garden. Charlotte was drawing with George and Louis while Catherine watched from the patio. After a while, Charlotte looked up and said, "Mummy, I don't want people to worry about me. I just want to be normal." Catherine smiled through tears, replying, "You are normal, darling. You're just a little braver than most." It was a small exchange, but one that Catherine would later describe to a close friend as the moment she realized her daughter's spirit was stronger than any diagnosis. Yet, even with that strength, the silence became unbearable. The longer they kept the secret, the heavier it felt. Friends who didn't know began asking innocent questions. Why Charlotte wasn't seen at certain events? Why Catherine appeared so fatigued? Each question was a reminder of the truth they couldn't share. The secrecy began to feel like isolation, a private island of worry surrounded by a sea of speculation. As the summer approached, the pressure intensified. A few eagle-eyed royal correspondents began piecing together patterns, Charlotte's reduced appearances, the subtle adjustments in royal scheduling. A well-known tabloid columnist published an article suggesting a mystery illness within the royal household. Though the story lacked detail, it was enough to send the palace's communications team into overdrive. They issued a firm no comment, but everyone inside knew the clock was ticking. Behind the scenes, An internal meeting was held at Buckingham Palace. Senior courtiers, communication heads, and the Wales's private secretaries gathered to discuss a controlled disclosure. The decision would ultimately rest with William and Catherine, but the advisors stressed the importance of timing. Releasing the news on their terms could prevent uncontrolled leaks and allow them to shape the public response. The couple agreed in principle but hesitated emotionally. Telling the world felt like surrendering their daughter's privacy. Still, they knew the storm was inevitable. In those final quiet days before the announcement, life inside the royal walls felt suspended in time. Catherine continued to visit hospitals discreetly, always avoiding detection. William focused on reassuring his children and maintaining stability. George, wise beyond his years, had begun asking gentle questions. He noticed the way his parents spoke in whispers and the way Charlotte sometimes winced when she moved. William and Catherine explained in careful terms that his sister's body needed a bit more help to stay strong. George nodded solemnly, promising to look after her. As nights settled over Windsor, the family would often gather in the living room, reading stories together, laughing when they could. Those small, ordinary moments became sacred. They were a reminder that love was their only real defense against what lay ahead. The palace might face a media storm, the monarchy might endure scrutiny, but within those walls, they clung to the simplicity of family. A mother, a father, and their children finding strength in each other. Then came the day the palace communications team finalized the draft announcement. It was concise, respectful, and written in the calm, formal tone of royal tradition. Yet for William and Catherine, reading it aloud for approval was agonizing. Every word felt personal. Every line carried an emotional echo. They reviewed it again and again, searching for a balance. That night was the last night of peace before the world learned the secret they had carried alone. The royal walls stood tall, illuminated in quiet dignity, holding their secrets one final time before the dawn shattered them open. When the palace finally confirmed that Princess Charlotte had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition, the world wanted answers. What exactly did it mean? How serious was it? Would it change her life completely? Or could it be managed quietly behind the walls of Kensington Palace? The announcement was carefully phrased to maintain privacy, yet its simplicity only deepened public curiosity. For many, a rare autoimmune condition was both unfamiliar and terrifying. It sounded vague enough to protect confidentiality but grave enough to stir global concern. Medical experts immediately began offering cautious interpretations. On British morning shows, pediatric specialists spoke about the broad nature of autoimmune diseases, how they occur when the body's immune system, meant to protect, turns against itself. The immune system, they explained, becomes confused, attacking healthy cells as though they were invaders. It is a cruel irony. The very mechanism that keeps us alive begins to inflict damage from within. For a young child, that battle can be exhausting, unpredictable, and lifelong. The palace, consistent with its long tradition of privacy, refused to name the exact condition. They said only that Charlotte's diagnosis had come after a period of ongoing symptoms, and that she was under the care of a multidisciplinary medical team. That phrasing suggested a condition complex enough to require several specialists, immunologists, rheumatologists, pediatricians, and perhaps therapists. It was clear this wasn't a fleeting illness. It was something that would shape her life and routine permanently. For the family, the path to understanding began long before the world even knew. During those months of uncertainty, William and Catherine sat through endless explanations from doctors, trying to absorb the unfamiliar vocabulary of medicine. Antibodies, inflammation markers, immune response pathways, all words that sounded more like riddles than answers. Each test brought a new wave of confusion. The couple kept notebooks filled with scribbled questions. Catherine, ever meticulous, created folders organized by symptom and date, determined to track every detail. The final diagnosis, though heartbreaking, was also a strange relief. At least now they had a name for what had been haunting their days and nights. The doctors explained that while the condition was rare, advances in medicine had made it manageable. Treatments existed to control the immune system's aggression, though they came with side effects. There would be ups and downs. Good days when Charlotte could run and play, and bad days when fatigue and pain would confine her to rest. But, with consistent care, the prognosis was cautiously optimistic. Still, understanding the medical reality was only part of the journey. The emotional impact was deeper. Catherine once confided to a close friend that the hardest part wasn't hearing the diagnosis. It was learning to live with it. "You begin to measure time differently," she reportedly said. "Not in days or weeks, but in test results, treatments, and the moments when your child feels strong again." For any parent, the thought of their child suffering is unbearable. For a mother whose every public moment is watched and dissected, the pain had to remain hidden behind composure. William faced his own struggle. His instinct was to fix things, to find solutions, to protect. But there was nothing to fix, only something to manage. It frustrated him, and yet it also grounded him. The realization that even a future king could not control the forces of biology humbled him profoundly. He began spending more time reading medical reports, talking to doctors, and learning how to support Catherine and Charlotte emotionally. It wasn't enough to provide security, he wanted understanding. He wanted to know the enemy they were fighting. As weeks turned into months, the family developed a rhythm. Charlotte's medications were timed precisely. Her diet became carefully planned, low in inflammatory triggers, rich in nutrients. She had regular appointments for checkups and treatments. The palace medical staff worked seamlessly with external specialists, creating an environment of stability. But stability came with vigilance. Every fever, every rash, every unusual fatigue was noted and discussed. Through it all, Charlotte adapted with remarkable grace. Children have a way of normalizing what adults fear. To her, the treatments were simply part of her routine. The doctors were friends in white coats. The hospital a place where they helped me feel better. Her resilience surprised even her caregivers. She would chat with nurses about her favorite animals, make drawings to give to doctors, and comfort younger patients she met during visits. Those moments of quiet kindness touched everyone who encountered her. The palace eventually decided to include an educational element in its communications, emphasizing awareness rather than secrecy. Health organizations across the UK quietly applauded the move. For the first time, an illness that many had never heard of was being discussed publicly without stigma. The palace's phrasing avoided pity and focused on strength. The princess is managing her condition with courage and positivity, surrounded by her loving family and dedicated care team. It became a line repeated in countless reports, a narrative of resilience instead of tragedy. Medical professionals who were not involved in the royal case nonetheless used the opportunity to shed light on autoimmune conditions in children. They explained how early detection was critical, how lifestyle and stress could affect symptoms, and how medical advances offered hope. They emphasized the importance of empathy for families dealing with invisible illnesses. In that sense, Charlotte's diagnosis, though painful, sparked a broader national conversation about children's health that might one day help others. Inside the palace, understanding the diagnosis also meant confronting new boundaries. The Wales family had to redefine what normal meant. There were new considerations for travel, public engagements, and even the simple act of play. Activities that once seemed harmless. Running in cold weather, staying up late, skipping meals, now came with risks. Her parents monitored her closely but tried not to make her feel different. Catherine encouraged art and music as forms of therapy. William took her for gentle walks in Windsor Great Park, where they talked about everything but illness. For George and Louis, the adjustment was subtle but significant. They sensed the shift in their home but didn't fully understand it. Catherine and William made sure to include them in the care process. Small gestures like helping Charlotte carry her backpack or reminding her to drink water. It became a family effort, one that strengthened their bond. Charlotte, ever proud, often insisted she didn't need help, but her brother's quiet support comforted her. The royal staff also had to adapt. Security arrangements for hospital visits were tightened. Schedules were rearranged to avoid overexposure. Even royal events were reconsidered with Charlotte's health in mind. When she appeared in public, every detail, from lighting to seating, was planned to ensure her comfort. The palace made sure that her appearances remained joyful, never forced. The public saw a smiling little girl waving at cameras, unaware of the coordination behind each moment. For William and Catherine, understanding the diagnosis also meant accepting vulnerability, a concept foreign to royal tradition. For centuries, the monarchy projected strength through stoicism. Illnesses were concealed, emotions hidden. But this generation of royals chose transparency in moderation. They understood that acknowledging imperfection didn't weaken the crown, it humanized it. The public's response proved them right. Far from criticism, the family received overwhelming support. Letters poured in from parents of children with similar conditions. Some enclosed handmade cards, others shared personal stories of recovery and perseverance. The palace's mailroom overflowed with empathy. The doctors continued to refine Charlotte's treatment plan. There were moments of progress, times when her energy returned, and she danced through the halls of their home like nothing had ever changed. But there were also setbacks. Days when fatigue made her retreat into quiet corners, when pain flared unexpectedly. Catherine learned to read her daughter's expressions, noticing the subtle cues that others might miss. When Charlotte smiled, she smiled fully. When she was unwell, her eyes revealed everything. Those were the moments that tested Catherine's strength most. William, too, began to find purpose in understanding rather than despair. He spoke privately to charities focused on children's health, seeking partnerships that could bring awareness without exploiting his daughter's story. He wanted to turn pain into purpose. Behind closed doors, he and Catherine began laying the groundwork for a new initiative dedicated to research into rare childhood diseases. They knew it would take time, but they also knew that one day, Charlotte's experience could help others. The process of understanding did not end with the medical charts. It extended to their own emotional transformation. For a couple accustomed to planning every detail of their public lives, this was an exercise in surrender. They had to accept unpredictability to live one day at a time. There was no script, no royal protocol for parenting through chronic illness. Every decision came from instinct and love. As autumn returned to London, bringing crisp air and early sunsets, the family's sense of rhythm began to settle. They were no longer reacting, they were adapting. Each new challenge was met with patience. Each small victory was celebrated quietly. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth had become clear to them all. Understanding the diagnosis wasn't just about knowing what the illness was. It was about learning who they would become because of it, stronger, closer, and more deeply human than they had ever been before. The first thing everyone noticed in the weeks following the announcement was how the family seemed to move as one. Gone were the separate public appearances, the divided schedules, and the distant expressions of royal duty. In their place stood unity, visible, deliberate, and deeply human. The Wales family, though shaken to its core, faced the storm together. Their home in Windsor became a sanctuary of love and quiet resilience, a place where laughter still echoed, even through the worry. Prince William and Princess Catherine made a silent pact. Whatever they did next would be grounded in strength, not sorrow. They would not let pity define their daughter's story, nor would they allow the diagnosis to eclipse her joy. Their task was not only to care for Charlotte but to remind the world, and themselves, that she was still the same bright, fearless child who had once made the late Queen laugh with her cheeky wave at the balcony. The illness would never be her identity. Their first family meeting after the announcement was held in the small sunroom of Adelaide Cottage. William, Catherine, George, and Louis sat with Charlotte, explaining gently that many people now knew about her condition. Charlotte listened quietly, tracing patterns on the arm of the couch with her finger. When her mother asked how she felt about it, she shrugged and said, "It's okay. Maybe they'll understand better now." The simplicity of her answer broke the tension in the room. George smiled at her, proud. Louis, ever affectionate, hugged her tightly. It was a small, ordinary moment, yet it marked the beginning of healing. In public, the family appeared serene, their expressions calm but resolute. William attended an engagement at a children's hospital just days after the announcement, where he spoke briefly about the importance of family support during illness. His words were not part of the prepared statement. he added them himself. Every child facing medical challenges deserves to feel safe, loved, and understood, he said. Those in attendance could sense the emotion behind his voice. It wasn't just a speech. It was a father speaking from the heart. Catherine, meanwhile, found solace in connection. She began privately reaching out to other parents who had written to her. The palace mailroom had received thousands of letters, handwritten notes, drawings, and tokens from families across Britain and abroad. Many came from mothers who had children with autoimmune conditions. They shared stories of resilience, of hope, of long nights by hospital beds. Catherine read every one she could. Some made her cry, others made her smile. Each one reminded her that she was not alone in this journey. Behind closed doors, she poured her energy into creating a stable environment for her children. The dining room, once a formal space, became a hub of family meals filled with conversation and laughter. The television was rarely on. Instead, they spent evenings reading, baking, or painting. Catherine wanted Charlotte's world to feel normal, not medicalized. She worked closely with doctors to incorporate play into treatment, turning therapy into something that felt like exploration rather than obligation. William took on the role of steady anchor, keeping the family's routine predictable. Every morning, he woke early to make breakfast for the children before school. He found peace in the simplicity of pouring cereal, tying shoelaces, and reminding them to pack their homework. For a man accustomed to formal duty and global attention, these small acts became sacred. They reminded him of what truly mattered, his role not as heir to the throne, but as a father. One weekend, William took Charlotte on a short walk through the park. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that made everything look softer, brighter. She wore her favorite pink coat and carried a small sketchbook, drawing trees as they went. At one point, she stopped and asked, "Daddy, will I always have to take medicine?" William knelt beside her and said gently, "You might, darling, but medicine is just a way to help your body stay strong. It doesn't stop you from doing anything you want to do." She smiled faintly and asked, "Even becoming a pilot like you wanted to be?" He laughed, brushing her hair back. "Even that," he replied. Those simple moments became the thread of their recovery, a quiet resilience woven through ordinary days. The family took strength from being together, leaning on routines that grounded them. Sunday walks, movie nights, bedtime stories. Each one was a small act of defiance against fear. Extended family members also stepped in. Carol and Michael Middleton spent more time at Windsor, helping with school pickups and household tasks. Catherine's sister, Pippa, visited often, bringing her own children to play with Charlotte and her brothers. Their laughter filled the garden, breaking the tension that had settled over the home in recent months. King Charles maintained regular contact, sending small gifts for his granddaughter, books, flowers, even a hand-carved wooden horse. Though his schedule remained packed, he found time for quiet phone calls with William, often ending them with the same words, "Take care of her. The rest can wait." Within the palace staff, there was a noticeable shift in tone. Where once everything revolved around official duties, there was now an atmosphere of gentleness. Advisors coordinated schedules around medical appointments without complaint. Even the press office, so often the epicenter of tension, took care to handle inquiries with compassion. The royal household, known for its formality, had quietly become a family itself. In the public sphere, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Charities began dedicating campaigns to autoimmune awareness, inspired by the princess's courage. Donations to children's hospitals increased significantly. The public no longer viewed the monarchy as distant figures. They saw parents, siblings, and a little girl facing life's challenges just like anyone else. For William and Catherine, that empathy became both a comfort and a mission. They realized that their personal ordeal could create awareness for thousands of families silently struggling with similar conditions. Catherine decided to channel her emotions into purpose. Working discreetly with her foundation, she began drafting plans for a new health initiative focused on early detection and emotional support for children with chronic illnesses. It was not a royal project for prestige. It was a personal one born from sleepless nights and maternal determination. No parent should feel lost when their child gets sick, she told a small team of advisors during an early meeting. We have to make sure they feel seen, supported, and understood. Meanwhile, Charlotte's resilience continued to inspire those around her. She returned to school on a reduced schedule, greeted by classmates who treated her no differently. Teachers described her as cheerful and curious, with a quiet focus that seemed to have deepened since her illness began. One teacher later shared that Charlotte had volunteered to read a passage in class about bravery. "It's not about not being scared," she said confidently. "It's about doing things even when you are." The classroom had fallen silent after she spoke. It was a simple statement, but one that carried the wisdom of a child who had already learned life's hardest lesson. At home, her siblings became her biggest cheerleaders. George often helped her with schoolwork, while Louis entertained her with jokes and games. Their bond grew stronger, their small world held together by laughter and shared understanding. There were moments of frustration, of course, days when Charlotte felt angry about her condition or tired of treatment. But Catherine and William approached those moments with patience, teaching her that emotions were part of healing too. The months after the announcement were not easy, but they brought transformation. The family's dynamic shifted from the structured rhythm of royal life to something more organic, more intimate. The Waleses were no longer just a royal unit. They were a family learning to live with vulnerability. It changed the way they spoke, the way they prioritized time, and the way they related to the public. In one of her first appearances after the announcement, Catherine attended a charity event for children's health. Reporters noticed that her speech carried a different tone, less formal, more heartfelt. She spoke about the quiet strength found in families who face the unknown together, her voice steady but tender. Those who listened knew she was speaking from experience. It was a rare moment when royal duty and personal truth merged seamlessly. William and Catherine also became more vocal advocates for medical transparency, though always careful to protect their daughter's privacy. They wanted to set an example that talking about illness, especially in children, should not be taboo. In doing so, they redefined what strength looked like within the monarchy. It wasn't about hiding pain, it was about carrying it with grace. Behind the grandeur of royal titles, what emerged was something profoundly relatable. A family weathering life's unpredictability with love as their compass.